Hi everyone, and welcome to part 3 of the story of Joseph, a man of favour and a man of foresight. Part 3 is called Back to Eden. So in the last video we looked at the part of the story where Joseph gets sold into slavery, and although his oldest brother Reuben tried to intervene and change the plans, it was Judah who had the idea of selling him, and that is exactly what happened. We're picking up the story today in chapter 38, and we're left on a bit of a cliffhanger with the lifeline of Joseph because 38 is all about the life of Judah. So we've already got an insight into the character of Judah. Judah was the fourth of the sons, and if we read previous chapters in the book of Genesis, we get an idea of what the first three were like. In chapter 35, we learn that Reuben had slept with one of his father's concubines. In chapter 34, we learn that Simeon and Levi, the second and third sons, had attacked a city after making a peace treaty. And part of that peace treaty was that the men in the city would be circumcised so that they would live in peace with the Israelites and they would take on their customs. So all of the men in the city kept their end of the deal. They all went, they got circumcised, and it tells us that while they were still in pain, Levi and Simeon came in the middle of the night and attacked and killed all the men. So we're kind of gaining a picture of what the brothers were like. We already knew they were jealous and they had evil in their hearts, and obviously they contemplated killing Joseph. So we come to chapter 38 knowing that brother 1, brother 2, brother 3 have already demonstrated moral corruption and failure, and chapter 38 just goes on to prove that Judah is no different. He marries a Canaanite woman, which would be an ungodly choice, as they should have married a Hebrew woman. It says that his sons were put to death by the Lord because they were wicked in the Lord's sight. He sent away his daughter-in-law Tamar, and Tamar should have been protected by the house of Judah. That was her husband's family, and when her husband was one of these men who was wicked and got put to death, she should have come under protection of Judah's home and family, and Judah didn't offer her protection. He sent her away. She turns to prostitution and ends up sleeping with Judah at a later point, and it's a very weird story, and she ends up falling pregnant, and she has twins, and one is called Perez and one is called Zerah. And if you read Matthew 1 verse 3 and Luke 3 verse 33, you will find that Perez is listed in the genealogy of Jesus, which is just there to remind us that, you know, this isn't just a family for us to judge all of their mess. This is Jesus's family. And this whole tragic story of the life of Judah in chapter 38 is the backdrop for chapter 39, where we now pick up the story of Joseph. In chapter 39 verse 2 it says the Lord was with Joseph, so he prospered. In verse 3 it says the Lord was with him and the Lord gave him success. Verse 4 says Joseph found favor. So within these first few verses the author is driving home the message that the favor followed Joseph. The Lord's blessing was upon his life, and although the coat of favor had been stripped from him, the Lord's hand of favor had not. He had such an abundance of blessing that it overflowed. Verse 5 says that the Lord blessed the house of Potiphar just because Joseph was there. And that should speak to us. We are blessed to overflowing as children of God. Philippians 4:19 says, God meets all our needs according to the riches of his glory. Luke 6 says, give and it will be given to you, a good measure, running over. Isaiah 41 says he will uphold you with his gracious right hand. 2 Corinthians says God is able to bless you abundantly. And just as Joseph's abundance overflowed, both in the house and the field, so those around us should feel the blessings of God as we serve them because Jesus serves us, as we give because he has given to us, as we show love because love has been shown to us, so we can pour out the blessings that we receive. Joseph was promoted and put in charge of Potiphar's house. Potiphar was the captain of the guard, and in verse 8 it says that Potiphar did not concern himself with anything other than what he needed to eat. One of my favorite verses is in Luke 2 verse 52, where it talks about Jesus as a child and he's growing up as all children do. And it says, Jesus grew in wisdom and stature, in favor with God and with man. And this is exactly what we can see happening here with Joseph. He has favor from God. He has favor from man. He's grown in stature. It says that he was a well-built and handsome man. And we're about to see that he demonstrates a tremendous amount of wisdom. You know, in the first video of this series, I talked about how Joseph was immature, his character was a bit underdeveloped, and now, after 11 years that he's been in Potiphar's house, he's a man, he's grown up, and he's grown in these 4 areas like Jesus did, and he's about to demonstrate a remarkable sense of character. Because Potiphar's wife approaches him and wants to sleep with him. And he looks at her and he says, my master does not concern himself with anything in this house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you. When I first read this, it got me thinking about another man who was given dominion over the land and who was the greatest in the land apart from the master, and who had one restriction in the land. And I'm talking about the Garden of Eden with Adam, humanity itself. Adam and Eve had full dominion over the land, and they were the greatest of all creation underneath their master, and they had one restriction. And they were tempted and they failed. But Joseph didn't. Joseph doesn't fail. He resists the temptation of Potiphar's wife and says no to her. And you know, we all face the Eden decision, whether to determine good and evil for ourselves and decide what will bring us happiness and what will bring us success and what will bring us pleasure as defined by ourselves, or deny ourselves and submit to what God has determined is good and to what God has defined as evil. And so here we have another Adam figure, another human being like the rest of us facing an Eden decision. He says to her, how could I do such evil and sin against God? And we can see in that one statement that he is defining evil according to God's way, and he has chosen to submit to God's definition. You know, from the line of Joseph's brother Judah, from the line of Joseph's nephew, Perez, comes a new Adam, a second Adam, who will grow in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man, one who will serve and honor his master and submit to the will of the Father, one who will pour out blessing upon blessing into overflow, one who will be tempted by Satan himself and not fail. Because the story of Joseph is beginning to form a picture. It's beginning to foreshadow an image of who is to come. Someone who is far greater than Adam, far greater than Joseph, one who can do what none of the others could do. Joseph is just a shadow of this eventual coming king. And his story is written here to build up and to point forward. All of the stories, the whole Bible is just building up and pointing forward to the one who is to come, Jesus. Thanks for watching part 3, Back to Eden. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back with another video for part 4 where we'll finish off a few more points that I have just at the end of chapter 39 and then continue on. I will see you in the next video.